President Biden has urged Israel not to use aid as a bargaining chip in its offensive against Hamas. The U.S. leader announced the setting up of a temporary pier off Gaza to facilitate humanitarian efforts.
Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day.
Efforts are underway to ramp up the delivery of life-saving supplies into Gaza as aid groups warn that hunger is most acute in the north of the enclave. Nations have carried out airdrops into Gaza over the past week to get around Israeli curbs and blocks on land deliveries. There are also efforts to carve out a sea route to deliver aid. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen expressed hopes that a humanitarian aid corridor between Cyprus and Gaza will open this weekend ahead of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. She is in Cyprus to inspect the port of Larnaca, which will be the launch point for aid shipments by sea. Meantime, as tensions in the West Bank run high, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has warned Israel that its expanded settlements in the occupied territory amount to, quote, a war crime and risk eliminating any practical possibility of a viable Palestinian state. Israel seized the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip after the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. But it is illegal under international law for Israel to build settlements there. And more Sarah Coates joins us live from Jerusalem. Sarah, Ramadan just days away, but we are still hearing contradictory remarks from Israeli officials whether, for example, Muslims can enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the fasting month. What's the latest on this?
Will be seen as a sign of international impatience with the Israeli government when it comes to
Hello there, Wei Su. There's certainly a lot of concern that this flashpoint area could really combust over the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which you said will begin in the next few days. This is certainly an area that doesn't need a war as a backdrop to see violent clashes. Just in this plaza there behind me at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, there are often extremely violent clashes. This is usually when Israeli security forces actually enter this area, which is considered the third holiest place in Islam. Now, when we're talking about the old city of Jerusalem in general, normally in the lead up to Ramadan, you'll walk around and you'll see many decorations, people in a fairly festive mood, ready to welcome in the Muslim holy month. But what we're seeing now on the ground is really a very somber mood. Many Israeli security forces heavily armed. They've been deployed right around this old city. And as you mentioned, a lot of concern that this could really explode. What we've been hearing from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is that there will be no extra restrictions on Muslims wanting to come and pray at this mosque over Ramadan. But this comes after calls from his far-right National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's really been trying to push Netanyahu to restrict Muslim worshippers at this mosque behind me. He wants no one under the age of 60 allowed to actually enter. What we've been hearing from the Israeli security establishment is it will continue to assess the situation on a week-by-week basis. So we certainly may see some change here, which could, of course, ignite tensions. And one other important thing that we do need to remember is what we've been hearing from the head of Hamas's Politburo, Ismail Haniyeh. He has been calling on Muslims from East Jerusalem, where I'm standing, and also from the West Bank to march on the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the first week of Ramadan. But we will certainly be here on the ground covering all of this for you.
Sarah, earlier on the bulletin, we were speaking about President Biden's State of the Union address, in which he emphasized the priority of humanitarian needs in Gaza. Of course, we're seeing international pressure also building on Israel not to mount that offensive that it has been threatening to mount in Rafah. What clarity do we have on any progress on the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
It is absolutely dire, Wei Su. We've heard from the United Nations that around a quarter of the population there in the Gaza Strip are on the brink of famine. And this is potentially about to become a whole lot worse. We've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu late yesterday. He's doubling down on this operation down into the southernmost city of Rafah, saying it simply will go ahead. He says we will push on when the international pressure rises. We must close ranks. We need to stand together against attempts to stop the war, saying that this is the last Hamas stronghold, that the IDF needs to go in there to find these senior Hamas leaders and also potentially find some of these hostages that do remain in the Strip. But this is certainly extremely concerning, given that no plan has yet been published on how to get these some 1.3 million internally displaced residents that are sheltering down in that southern city of Rafah out, amid widespread international concern that this will be an absolute catastrophe if Israeli forces do in fact go into Rafah. So certainly a lot of concern there. And we did just see last Thursday how dire the aid situation in the Strip is when we saw this horrendous attack on that aid convoy. The IDF has just come out earlier today to say that it's finished an initial probe into that incident. It says that troops didn't fire on that convoy, that they fired precisely on these targets that were coming near the convoy, but this is being slammed by the Palestinians.
Thanks. Sarah Coates reporting live from Jerusalem.